Chapter 1, The Key Card. If you're reading this, you probably shouldn't be. I found these pages tucked inside a hollowed-out missal in the Vatican Library's donation bin. Someone wanted them gone, but not destroyed. Not yet. My name is Father Luca Moretti. Up until 3 months ago, I was an exorcist working out of the Archdiocese of Naples. Then something went wrong. Very wrong. And now I pull the night shift in the one place the church pretends doesn't exist, level -7 of the Apostolic Secret Archives. They call it a penitential reassignment. I call it exile with better architecture. The transfer came down the same week the Naples papers finally stopped running the story about the girl, 18 years old, possessed for 9 months, speaking fluent Sumerian while her bones cracked like dry twigs. The rite was supposed to be textbook. I'd done dozens. But that night the demon laughed in my voice, used my hands to tear the stole from my neck, and whispered my own childhood sins back to the family who'd hired me when the smoke cleared. The girl was gone, not dead, gone. No body, no blood, just an empty circle of salt and a Polaroid on the floor showing me smiling in a room I'd never been in. 2 days later, a black envelope arrived at the rectory. Inside, a one-way train ticket to Rome and a note in perfect ecclesiastical Latin. Your talents are required below. No signature. Just the seal of the Secretariat of State, the one with the keys that look like they could unlock hell itself if you turned them the wrong way. I thought it was a joke until the Swiss guard met me at Termini Station and drove me straight through a gate I didn't know existed. From there, an elevator that only responds to a key card with no markings, no floor buttons. Just a slot in a tiny etched Roman numeral Edithef, upside down. Monsignor Gallo was waiting for me in the guard's lounge that smells like old incense and older coffee. 79 going on 200, skin like wet parchment, white hair that looks electrocuted, and a left eye that's clearly glass, milky blue, fixed stare. He poured 2 fingers of grappa into a teacup with the Vatican crest and slid it across the table. Welcome to the tomb, Father Moretti. His voice sounded like a cassette tape left in the sun. You drink? I'm not supposed to. He smiled with half his mouth. Down here, the rules are flexible. He explained the job the way you explain cancer, slowly, with long pauses so you can pretend you're not hearing it. Level 7 houses material too dangerous for even the regular secret archives. Books that bite, relics that scream, things the Index Librorum Prohibitorum was invented to hide, not just ban. My shift, midnight to 6, alone, inventory, climate control checks, and if something moves that shouldn't, call Gallo on the red phone that only rings one way. Then he reached into his cassock and pulled out a black keycard attached to a rosary chain. The beads were human finger bones, yellowed and polished smooth. This opens everything, he said. Doors, locks, seals the church put in place when Constantine was still figuring out which way the cross faced. One rule, never read aloud. Not a word, not even if it begs. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Stoop begs? Gallo didn't laugh back. His glass eye caught the fluorescent light and gleamed like it was wet. Especially if it begs. He stood, joints popping, and walked me to the elevator. The ride down took longer than physics should allow. No music, just the smell of stone getting colder, older, wetter. When the doors opened on 7, the air hit me like walking into a crypt that had been breathing through a corpse's mouth. Candles in wall sconces, real wax, real flame, flickered even though there was no draft. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness, so complete it felt solid. Gallows stayed in the elevator. First night solo, tradition. He tapped the keycard against my palm. It was warm, too warm. Remember, nothing leaves, nothing enters, and nothing gets read. The doors began to close. I opened my mouth to ask what happens if I break the rule. His good eye narrowed. The glass one blinked, slowly, deliberately, like it had been waiting for permission. The elevator sealed shut. I was alone. I clipped the keycard to my belt and started walking the main aisle, marble floor cold enough to burn through my shoes. The shelves were iron and oak, 12 feet high, labeled in Latin abbreviations I only half recognized. Codex Daemonum, Fragmenta Necromantica, Reliquiae Condemnorum. Every few yards, a glass case glowed faintly from within, something moving inside that might have been paper, might have been skin. I told myself it was nerves, jet lag, guilt. The girl in Naples had looked at me right before she vanished and said, in my mother's voice, "You are always going to fail us, Luca." 50 feet ahead, total darkness. Then a match scratched. A single candle lit itself on a reading table I hadn't noticed. Flame tall and steady, throwing shadows that bent the wrong way. On the table sat an open book the size of a coffin lid, pages yellow, edges charred, no title on the spine, just one line illuminated by the flame, written in fresh red ink that hadn't been there a second ago. "Welcome back, Father Moretti. We've been waiting since Naples." The candle flared higher. The shadows on the wall behind it stretched into the shape of a little girl hanging from a ceiling beam, neck wrong, feet dripping. I took one step forward. The flame went out, pitch black again, and somewhere in the dark, very close, the soft click of a glass eye blinking twice. Chapter 2. The Ledger of the Living Dead. The candle never relit itself after that first night. I waited for it, half expecting the flames to flare back like some cheap horror trick. Nothing. Just the low hum of the climate control and the smell of cold stone that gets into your lungs and stays there. I didn't sleep the rest of the shift. When the elevator finally rose at 6, Gallo was already waiting with a fresh cup of grappa-laced espresso. He didn't ask how the night went, just stared at me with that good eye and said, "You'll want to start in section 3. The ledger there likes new blood." Section the 3 was tucked behind a false wall of 19th century hymnals that smelled like mildew and guilt. The shelves were lower here, almost coffin height, and the air tasted metallic, like someone had been licking pennies in the dark. I ran my flashlight over the spines until I found it, a thick volume bound in cracked human skin. Yeah, actual skin, pale and tattooed with faint stigmata scars. Gold lettering on the spine read, "Catalogus Damnatorum Vivorum, 1572, the Catalogue of the Living Damned." Historians argue whether Pope Gregory XIII really commissioned it, or if it was the work of some overzealous Dominican with too much ink and not enough sunlight. But the Church has never denied its existence, just buried it deeper than most popes. I pulled it down. It was heavier than it should have been. like the pages were soaked in something thicker than vellum. The cover creaked open on its own, almost polite, revealing a title page illustrated with a woodcut of a man being pulled into the ground by skeletal hands while still breathing. Someone had annotated it in red ballpoint, still accurate. The entries were meticulous: name, date of excommunication, nature of the crime, final disposition. Most ended with corpus tridatum saeculo, body handed over to the secular arm. Church code for we burned him, but technically the state lit the match. I flipped through, half academic curiosity, half trying to prove to myself this was just another dusty relic. Then the handwriting changed. The first few hundred pages were quill and iron gall ink, faded to brown. Around the 18th century, it shifted to fountain pen by the 1950s, typewriter, and the last 20 pages, ballpoint, felt tip, even gel pen in colors that didn't exist before 1990, fresh. The most recent entry was dated 3 weeks ago. Ink still smelled faintly of solvent. I stopped breathing. Entry, number 1287, Johannes Petrus Schweitzer, declared damnatus vivus on 12th of March 1484 for consorting with the angel of the bottomless pit. Crime, attempted to sell the true name of God to a Venetian merchant for 30 ducats and a night with his daughter. Sentence, excommunicated so thoroughly his soul was declared legally non-existent. Body never found. Status, active containment, level 7, vault 9. Stapled to the page was a Polaroid. The photo showed a man in modern black clerical suit, Roman collar, crisp white, standing in what looked like the Apostolic Palace balcony. Same sharp cheekbones as the 1484 woodcut portrait sketched beside the entry. Same thin lips curled in the exact same half smile. The man in the photo was Cardinal Augustine Schweitzer, Secretary of State to the last 3 popes, the one who signs the transfer orders. My hands went cold. The rosary in my pocket, the one made of finger bones, started heating up like it was sitting on a stove. I fumbled for my phone. No signal down here. Of course. But the camera still worked. I needed proof, something to take upstairs and shove under someone's nose until they admitted this was insane. I angled the lens over the page, flash off so it wouldn't reflect. Click. The second the shutter sound echoed, the book slammed shut. Not fell, slammed. Like someone with 2 hands and serious anger issues, my left index and middle fingers were still between the pages. The pain hit a heartbeat later, bone-crushing pressure, wet crunch, warmth spreading over my knuckles. Blood, my blood. I yanked back. The ledger didn't let go at first. It held on, pages fluttering like it was tasting me. Then it released with a wet pop, and I stumbled backward into the opposite shelf. Books rained down, old missals, a brass censer that clanged like a church bell in a tomb. The ledger lay closed on the floor, perfectly centered in the flashlight beam. Then it opened again, by itself, pages flipping fast, too fast to read, stopping on a blank one near the very end. Fresh ink bled onto the page, forming letters right in front of me, not written, appearing, like invisible fingers pressing a pen that wasn't there. Luca Antonio Maria Moretti declared damnatus vivus, 3rd of November, 2019. Crime. Allowed the vessel to be taken. Spoke the wrong name aloud. Current location, level 7, temporary. Status, pending retrieval, underneath. In smaller script that kept writing itself, even as I watched. "We told you not to read aloud. Father, she's still waiting in Naples. She brought friends." The temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged. The flashlight flickered once, and twice, then steadied, pointing at the shelf directly behind where the ledger had been. There was a gap now, a space where a book had been pulled forward 6 inches on its spine, in the same fresh red ink, property of Matteo Rossi. "Do not return until 1963. I knew that name. Every cleric in Italy knows that name. The altar boy who vanished inside the Vatican during Vatican II, 9 years old, never found. The official file says he wandered off during a tour. The unofficial file, the one I wasn't supposed to see during my transfer, says security footage showed him walking into the archives holding a candle that burned black and never walking out. My crushed fingers throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Blood dripped onto the marble, each drop hissing like it was hitting hot iron. I looked down. The drops weren't spreading. They were arranging themselves, forming letters. L-U-C-A. Then the overhead light, the one emergency bulb that never turns off, exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness, total, and from somewhere deeper in section 3, the soft, deliberate sound of a child blowing out a candle. Chapter 3, The Screaming Reliquary. I stopped bleeding eventually. The crushed fingers swelled purple and throbbed like they had their own heartbeat. But the blood on the marble dried into perfect little letters that spelled my name, then flaked away like ash when I swept them with my shoe. I left the ledger exactly where it fell, open to my fresh entry, ink still wet and accusing. Some rules you learn fast. Down here, closing a book that wants to stay open is like trying to shove a ghost back into its grave. It just comes out angrier. I needed distance, air that didn't taste like iron and old paper. I walked the aisles until the shelves gave way to the reliquary wing, a long, narrow gallery lit by a single row of red sanctuary lamps that never quite went out. The cases here were different. Thicker glass, triple sealed, each one humming with its own low refrigeration unit. The church has been collecting pieces of saints since the catacombs were still fresh. But these weren't the pretty ones you kiss on feast days. These were the leftovers, the parts that screamed when they were cut off, the ones that refused to stay dead. I was supposed to do a visual inventory every shift. Check the seals, note any condensation, make sure nothing had shifted. Most nights it was routine. A finger of St. Catherine here, a vial of the holy foreskin there. Yes, that was real once. Historians still argue whether it ascended with the rest of him or got quietly misplaced during the sack of Rome in 1527. I moved down the row with my clipboard, trying to ignore how the rosary in my pocket kept getting hotter, like it was warning me about something I hadn't noticed yet. Case 47, label in faded Latin, Reliquarium Sanctae Luciae, Lingua Partialis, a reliquary made from the finger bones of condemned heretics. Ironic, considering it supposedly held a piece of Saint Lucia's tongue, the one she ripped out herself, rather than renounce her faith. The bones were arranged into the shape of an open, screaming mouth, jaws wrenched impossibly wide, tiny teeth carved from more phalanges. It had always looked grotesque, but harmless, a macabre bit of medieval theater. Tonight the glass was fogged from the inside. I leaned closer. My breath added another layer of mist. Through it, I could see the bones weren't white anymore. They were pink, wet. Tiny red threads, no, capillaries, were weaving between the joints like ivy growing in fast forward. I blinked, rubbed my good hand across my eyes. The threads thickened into muscle fiber, raw and glistening. The lower jaw sagged further, cartilage popping into place with soft, wet clicks I shouldn't have been able to hear through the seal. I stepped back. My heel caught the edge of the runner rug, and I almost went down. The clipboard clattered when I looked up again. Lips were forming, pale at first, then flushing with blood, stretching thin over the new teeth that were pushing through the bone like maggots through rotting fruit. The tongue, what was left of the relic, swelled, blackened, split down the middle, and began to move, not randomly, rhythmically, mouthing words. I couldn't hear them, but I could read them. Latin, perfect ecclesiastical pronunciation, the kind drilled into you in seminary until it feels like your native tongue. Aperuisti me, over and over. Aperuisti me, aperuisti me. I knew that phrase, had whispered it myself in Naples, during the rite, when I thought I was binding the demon and instead cracked something open I was never meant to touch. It means, you opened me. But the full sentence, the one carved into the girl's bedroom wall in her own fingernails the night she vanished, was longer. Aperuisti me in Neapoli. You opened me in Naples. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the glass. The surface was warm now, almost feverish. Inside, the lips kept moving, faster, desperate. The eyes, no. There were no eyes, just empty sockets where the cheekbones met. But somehow it was looking straight at me. The tongue flicked against the teeth, leaving streaks of dark saliva that smelled, even through the seal, like the copper and ozone stink of possession. I ran, not far, just to the security alcove at the end of the gallery. There's a bank of ancient monitors there, grainy black and white feeds from cameras installed back when John Paul II was still young and paranoid. I slammed the door, locked it out of habit, and pulled up case 47 on the main screen. Timestamp showed I'd walked away 12 minutes ago on the recording. The reliquary was already changing, bones knitting, flesh blooming, lips forming in jerky, accelerated bursts, like watching a flower open in one of those old nature films. Except the flower was screaming silently, and the petals were human skin. At the 6-minute mark, the mouth finished, it paused, turned, impossibly. The entire reliquary rotated on its pedestal to face the camera directly. Then it spoke. No sound on the feed, but the shape of the words was unmistakable. Luca, my full baptismal name, the one only used in exorcisms and baptisms. Luca Antonio Maria Moretti. It knew the part I never tell anyone, the Maria, after my mother who died when I was 7. The part I dropped the day I put on the collar because it felt too soft for the work I thought I was called to do. The mouth smiled. The expression didn't fit the bone structure. The cheeks split to make room. I grabbed the red phone. It rang twice before Gallo picked up, voice thick with sleep and grappa. The reliquary in 47, I said. My voice cracked like a teenager's. It's growing. Silence, and then a sigh that sounded like a tomb opening. Ah, Lucia's tongue, She always did have a dramatic flair, a rustle, like he was sitting up. You didn't open the case, did you? No. Good. Don't. Some saints don't forgive. It said my name, Gallo. It said, you opened me in Naples. Another pause. Longer. Get away from the monitors. Father, some things look for you when you look for them. I hung up. The screen flickered. The reliquary was still facing the camera, but now the flesh was receding, muscle melting back into bone, lips shrinking, capillaries retreating like time running backward. By the time I worked up the nerve to walk back to the gallery, the case was fogged again, from the outside this time, my handprint still on the glass, smeared with blood from my crushed fingers. Inside, the bones were clean, white, screaming mouth frozen exactly as it had been for centuries, but on the inside of the glass, finger written in something thicker than condensation, were the words, "She's almost ready," and beneath that, in smaller letters, like an afterthought, "Tell the Cardinal his ancestor says hello." I didn't sleep when my shift ended. I sat in the guard's lounge with my hand wrapped in a bandage that kept soaking through, staring at the grappa bottle Gallo had left. I didn't drink, not because of the vow. Vows feel negotiable down here, but because I was afraid of what I might say if my tongue got loose. Because somewhere between the pain and the panic, a thought had started crawling around my skull like a worm with too many legs. If the tongue of a saint could grow flesh and speak with the voice of a demon, I failed to cast out. What else down here was waiting for the right mouth to open? Chapter 4, The Confession That Knows Tomorrow. I started carrying the digital recorder after the tongue incident, a cheap thing from the guard's lost and found, olive wood casing. Tiny microphone that picks up everything from heartbeats to the subtle creak of a soul trying to lie. Gallo raised an eyebrow when he saw it clipped to my belt, but said nothing. Just refilled my espresso with a splash more grappa than usual and muttered something about ears being worse than eyes down here. The portable confessional arrived on a Tuesday, or what passes for Tuesday when you never see the sun, a wooden crate the size of a coffin, delivered by 2 Swiss guards who wouldn't meet my gaze, stenciled on the side in faded black, Proprietà dell'Inquisizione Romana, 1697, property of the Roman Inquisition. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that smelled of myrrh and old blood, was the booth itself, dark walnut, Nair carved with screaming cherubs, the kind of craftsmanship that makes you wonder if the artist was confessing his own sins while he worked. Gallo supervised the installation in the old interrogation alcove, a brick chamber off the main gallery that still had iron rings bolted to the walls. "From the palace of the Holy Office," he said, wheezing as he directed the guards, "used during the trials of Giordano Bruno and the rest, burned men for less than looking at it funny." He tapped the grate with his cane. "They say it hears both sides of the screen." I laughed. Nervous habit. "Both sides?" Gallo's glass eye caught the red lamplight. "The penitent confesses, the priest absolves, but this one, it absolves first." They left it there, curtain drawn, kneeling bench polished smooth by centuries of trembling knees. I logged it as item 3112B, Confessio Portatilis, condition stable, no anomalies. Then I went back to pretending the world still made sense. That changed 3 nights later. I was doing rounds, flashlight beam cutting lazy arcs across the floor. When I heard it, a voice, male, mid-40s, Roman accent thick as fresh mortar, coming from the alcove. Bless me, Father, for I will sin. I froze. The red phone was in my hand before I realized I'd grabbed it. No dial tone, just Gallows snoring on the other end when I finally pressed call. I hung up and crept closer. Recorder already running. The curtain was open 6 inches. No one on the penitent's side, no one on the priest's, but the voice kept going. Calm, almost bored, like a man reciting grocery lists. On the 23rd of March, 2027, I will stand on the loggia of St. Peter's and announce that the church has been wrong for 2,000 years, that there is no hell, only archives, that the keys Peter was given open doors better left locked. The crowd will cheer at first, then the shooting starts. My blood turned to ice water. The voice wasn't describing a sin, it was describing an event, future tense, and the way it said, "the shooting starts," sent me flashing back to briefings I'd sat in after Dallas. After Sarajevo, security protocols for papal appearances that no one outside the Vatican ever hears about. I stepped into the alcove. The air inside was warmer, heavy, like breathing inside a lung. The voice didn't pause. 3 bullets, 1 to the throat, silences the heresy, 1 to the heart, stops the mercy, 1 to the head, because they always aim the head for last. He will fall forward over the balustrade, white cassock blooming red like the old cardinals always joked about, and in that moment, the world will learn what we've kept in level -7 since Nero. I knew that voice now. I'd heard it on Christmas Urbi et Orbi broadcasts, thin and Argentine and kind. The cadence was perfect. It was Pope Francis speaking, 2 years from now, confessing his own death. I raised the recorder higher. My hand shook so badly the red LED blurred. But the real sin, Father, the Pope's voice continued, softer now, almost tender, is that I already know. I've known since Buenos Aires, since the night the angel visited me in the slum chapel and offered me the same choice they offered Peter. Deny him 3 times before the cock crows, or open the door and let morning in. I chose morning, and morning always burns. Silence, thick enough to chew, then a different voice, female, young, the girl from Naples, 18, terrified, the one who vanished when I spoke the wrong name. You could have saved me, Luca, you still can. Just kneel, say the words, I forgive you. My knees hit the kneeler before I could stop them. Old muscle memory from seminary. The wood was warm, too warm, like skin. The grate between the 2 sides was carved walnut, latticed so you could hear but not see. I leaned toward it. Who's there? My voice cracked like a 12-year-old's. No answer. Then the grate slid open by itself, slow, deliberate, the wood scraping like teeth on bone. A child's hand reached through, small, pale, fingers too long, joints bending wrong. The palm faced me, skin blistered and black in the perfect shape of the sigil I used in Naples, the one I burned into the floor with holy water and rage when the demon wouldn't leave. The cross inside the circle, inside the star, edges still smoking. It curled its fingers, beckoned. I screamed, couldn't help it. The sound bounced off brick and came back smaller, like the room was swallowing it. I scrambled backward, knocking over the recorder. The hand withdrew. The grate slammed shut with a sound like a jaw snapping. When I found the courage to look again, the booth was empty, curtains still, but on the kneeler, my side, was a single drop of blood. Fresh, warm. I touched it, brought it to my nose, myrrh and ozone. The exact smell of the girl's room, the night everything went wrong. The recorder was still running. I played it back later, up in the guard's lounge, hands shaking so badly I spilled grappa all over the table. The Pope's voice was there. The girl's voice was there, and at the very end, just before my scream, a third voice, mine, but older, tired, speaking perfect Latin backwards. The translation hit me like a slap. I accept the keys, open the door. Gallo found me at dawn, staring at the recorder like it might bite. He listened to the last 10 seconds without blinking. Then he did something I'd never seen him do. He crossed himself twice. That booth, he said, voice barely above a whisper, was used by the priest who heard Galileo's real confession, not the one in the history books. The one where he admitted what he saw through the telescope wasn't stars. It was eyes looking back. He poured me a full cup of grappa this time. No espresso. Whatever you do, son, he said, don't go back in there alone. I nodded, drank, burned my throat all the way down, but I was already planning my next shift. Because the booth knew tomorrow, and tomorrow, apparently, knew me. Chapter 5. The Boy from 1962. I stopped trusting the cameras after the confessional, not because they lied. Cameras down here are too old and too honest for that, but because they started showing things that hadn't happened yet, or things that had happened so long ago, the film should have rotted off the reels. Gallo noticed me jumping at every flicker on the monitors and just grunted. Eyes play tricks. Film remembers. Then he handed me a small silver flask of unconsecrated communion wine and told me to dilute the grappa for once. I drank it neat anyway. It tasted like pennies and forgiveness that never quite arrives. The boy appeared on a Thursday feed, except Thursdays don't exist on level 7. The calendar down here is whatever the Vatican says it is. And lately it had been stuck somewhere between 1962 and Judgment Day. I was reviewing restored archival footage, part of a digitization project the upper levels ordered after some cardinal decided preserving the past sounded better than making sure nothing crawls out of it. The reel was labeled in neat Vatican typewriter font, Sicurezza Archivi Segreti, Ottobre 1962, Security Archives, October 1962. The same month the Second Vatican Council opened upstairs, when the church decided to fling its windows open to the modern world and accidentally let something else in. The footage was grainy, black and white, shot from a fixed camera above the main gallery entrance. Timestamp 1742, 16th of October, 1962. A group of bishops in full choir dress, cassocks, mozzettas, the whole peacocking parade, were being given a rare tour. In the middle of them, holding a brass candlestick taller than he was, walked a 9-year-old in a red cassock 2 sizes too big, Matteo Rossi. The name was written on the tape box in red pen, along with a single word, svanito, vanished. I'd heard the story in seminary whispers, altar boy from a Roman parish, selected as a special honor to serve at the council's opening mass, disappeared during a bathroom break that somehow led him 3 floors underground into corridors no child should have found. Search parties for days, dogs, Swiss guards with rifles, nothing. The official explanation: tragic accident. Boy wandered off, fell down an old maintenance shaft. Case closed. Prayers said. End of story. Except on the restored reel. Matteo didn't wander off. He stopped in the middle of the gallery, turned directly to the camera, and smiled. Not the nervous smile of a kid overwhelmed by pomp and incense. A slow, knowing smile, like he'd been expecting the lens. Then he raised the candlestick. The candle wasn't white. It burned black, flame the color of oil slicks, throwing shadows upward instead of down. The bishops didn't notice. They kept walking, chattering in Latin about schema and aggiornamento, as if a child holding hellfire was perfectly normal. Matteo blew out the black flame with a single breath. The screen went static for exactly 3 seconds. When it cleared, he was gone. No blur of movement, no open door, just empty aisle and the faint smell of sulfur that somehow came through the monitor speakers. I paused the footage, rewound, froze on the frame where he looked up. His eyes were milk white, no pupils, like someone had erased them with chalk and forgotten to draw them back in. That was last week. Tonight the same camera, live feed, not restored, was showing him again. I almost dropped the flask. There, in real time. Matteo Rossi walked the main gallery, barefoot, red cassock hanging off him like a shroud, him soaked dark at the bottom. The black candle was back in his hand, flame dancing the wrong color, casting long shadows that stretched toward the lens, like fingers trying to crawl out of the screen. He was still 9, exactly 9, not a day older than the day he vanished. He stopped beneath the camera and tilted his head, listening. Then he started walking straight toward section 13, where the ledger had written my name in fresh ink. His bare feet left prints on the marble, wet prints. They steamed, bubbled, and evaporated into yellow sulfur clouds that smelled like matches struck in a tomb. I could smell it through the ventilation system, sharp enough to make my eyes water. I grabbed the red phone, dead, for the first time since I'd been here. No dial tone, just a soft child's giggle echoing down the line. I did the only thing that made sense. I followed him. The gallery was colder than usual, the sanctuary lamps flickering like they were running out of faith. Matteo's footprints glowed faintly, a breadcrumb trail of evaporating hell water leading deeper. I stepped around them at first. Then, when one hissed and nearly burned through my shoe, right through them, the pain shot up my leg like frostbite in reverse. He never looked back, just walked, candle held high, black flame painting the walls with shadows that moved on their own, shapes of mitred bishops with too many arms, mouths opening in silent screams. At the end of the gallery, where the false wall hid the catalogus, he stopped, turned left instead, toward a door I'd never seen before. It was bricked up, seamless, no handle, no hinges, just a Latin inscription carved deep into the stone, quod inferius est. That which is below. Matteo raised his free hand and wrote in the dust that coated the bricks. His finger left smoking trails. They never stopped the council. The words hung there, glowing orange, then sank into the stone like acid. The bricks began to sweat. Dark liquid seeped from the mortar, running down in rivulets that smelled of incense and old blood. A low rumble started beneath my feet, not vibration, but chanting. Hundreds of voices, Latin, backwards, the same cadence I'd heard from the confessional, but deeper, older, like the building itself was praying in reverse. Matteo turned to me then. For the first time, his mouth opened. No sound came out, but I heard him anyway, inside my skull, gentle as a lullaby and sharp as a scalpel. You were supposed to close the door. Father Luca, in Naples, upstairs, everywhere. He reached toward the bricked wall. His hand passed through it like smoke. The black candle followed, then the rest of him, stepping into solid stone the way you step through a curtain. The sulfur prints faded. The chanting stopped. The door was just bricks again, except for one thing. On the floor, in the last steaming footprint, something small glinted. I knelt, picked it up with shaking fingers. A brass button from a 1962 altar boy cassock, still warm, and engraved on the back. In tiny letters I'd never noticed in the old photos, property of the Council Fathers, return if found. I looked up. The camera in the corner, the one that had watched him vanish 63 years ago, was pointed straight at me now, lens cracked in a perfect spider web. In the center of the crack, a single black flame burned, steady and patient, waiting. I ran, not away, toward the elevator, toward Gallo, toward anything that still pretended the world upstairs was safe. But as the doors closed and the car began its slow climb, I caught my reflection in the polished metal wall. For just a second, the boy stood behind me, candle raised, smiling. Then the lights went out, and the chanting started again, this time from inside the elevator shaft. Chapter 6. The Mercury Mirror of Sylvester II. I stopped sleeping, not in the dramatic Hollywood way, just short, shallow dozes in the guard's lounge chair, waking every 20 minutes to the taste of sulfur that wouldn't leave my tongue. Gallo noticed the circles under my eyes and started leaving 2 cups of grappa-laced coffee instead of 1. He never asked what I saw on the monitors. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he'd seen it all decades ago and just learned to live with the echoes. The mirror arrived without warning, the way everything dangerous does down here. A wooden crate the color of dried blood, delivered by the same Swiss guards who never speak. No manifest, no note. Just a wax seal on the lid stamped with the umbrella and keys of a pope who died 1,000 years ago, Sylvester II. The Frenchman who supposedly sold his soul for the papacy and a machine that could answer any question with yes or no. Historians love him, Gerbert of Aurillac, the scholar who brought Arabic numerals to Europe, built water organs, and allegedly kept a bronze talking head in his chambers. The church prefers the sanitized version, brilliant polymath, tragic illness, peaceful death on May 12th, 1003. The unsanitized version, the one whispered in seminary corridors after too much wine, says the head foretold his death in Jerusalem. So he avoided the Holy Land until the day he celebrated Mass in the Roman Church of Santa Croce in Jerusalem, died right there on the altar, body splitting open like overripe fruit while the congregation screamed. The crate contained his mirror, not the bronze head, the mirror. A sheet of polished mercury glass is set in a frame of blackened silver. Runes etched so fine they looked like cracks. The surface didn't reflect light the way normal mirrors do. It swallowed it. When the guards pried the lid off, the air in the alcove dropped 10 degrees, and every sanctuary lamp in the gallery dimmed like someone had turned a dial. Gallo read the accompanying card, yellowed parchment, Latin written in what looked like dried blood, and went very still. "Excuse speculum Gerbertianum," he said. His voice sounded farther away than usual. "We thought this was destroyed in the Lateran fire of 1308. He told me the rule the way you tell a child not to touch a stove after it's already glowing red. You look once, you see yourself flayed alive in this exact spot, exactly 24 hours from the moment you finish looking. That's the bargain. Cover it, and the flaying starts immediately. No delay, no mercy. The Pope learned that the hard way." I laughed. Couldn't help it. Sleep deprivation makes everything sound ridiculous. "So don't look away?" Gallo's good eye fixed on me. The glass one didn't blink. "Exactly." They hung it in the deepest alcove, the one no inventory list acknowledges, behind a velvet curtain the color of arterial blood. I logged it as item 88X, speculum argenteum, provenance uncertain. Do not uncover without level 9 clearance. Then I went back to pretending the world still had edges. That lasted 4 hours. I was cataloging a stack of suppressed grimoires, books that literally bite if you mispronounce the title, when the temperature plummeted again. The kind of cold that crawls inside your cassock and nests against your skin. The velvet curtain was moving, not swaying, rippling, like something behind it was breathing. I told myself it was the climate control, told myself a lot of things down here. I pulled the curtain aside. The mirror was waiting. My reflection stared back, but wrong. The alcove behind me was the same. Bricks sweating condensation. Single bulb flickering overhead, but the me in the glass had no skin, just raw muscle, glistening red, eyes wide and white in a face that was all teeth and tendon. The skinless Luca raised a hand, slow, deliberate, and began peeling a strip from his own cheek. The sound it made, wet velvet tearing, was perfectly audible even though the mirror was silent. I gagged, stepped back. The reflection didn't. It kept peeling, methodical, folding the skin into neat strips that dropped to the floor with wet slaps. Blood pooled around its bare feet, spreading toward the glass like it wanted out. I looked away. Couldn't help it. The human body isn't wired to watch itself being disassembled in real time. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed the velvet curtain and yanked it closed. The cold intensified, became knives. Then the screaming started, not from the mirror, from the hallway. I ran. The guard's lounge door was open. Gallo sat in his usual chair, back to me, pouring grappa into a cup that never seemed to fill. The screaming was coming from him, high, animal, wet. I rounded the chair and stopped dead. His face was peeling, not metaphorically, literal strips of skin lifting away from his cheeks, his forehead curling like birch bark in a fire. Blood poured down his collar in sheets, soaking the cassock black. His good eye was fixed on me, calm, almost amused. The glass eye rolled lazily in its socket, independent of the rest. "You weren't supposed to look away, Father Luca," he said. His voice was perfect, the same gravel and grappa rasp I'd known for months. But the lips, moving beneath the peeling flesh, weren't his. They were too wide, too many teeth, a strip of skin detached from his left cheek with a sound like tape ripping beneath it. The muscle twitched and grinned. I backed up until the wall hit my shoulders. Gallo, he stood, slowly, joints popping like gunfire. Another strip curled away from his neck, revealing raw red underneath. The smell hit me, copper, formaldehyde, and something older, like parchment, left in a crypt. Monsignor Gallo died in 1987, he said conversationally, stepping closer. Heart attack in this very chair. I buried him myself, deep, where the Nero catacombs meet the old Etruscan ones. He screamed beautifully when the skin finally came off. His face split fully now, from hairline to chin, the entire mask of flesh peeling away in one piece and dropping to the floor with a wet slap. Beneath it was Gallo still, same crooked nose, same white stubble, but wrong. The eyes were black glass, reflecting nothing. The smile was too large for the skull. He tilted its head. I've been waiting for someone who failed an exorcism, it said, voice echoing from somewhere deeper than the throat. Someone who opened a door and couldn't close it. Someone the things downstairs would recognize. The flayed mask on the floor twitched, began crawling toward me on strips of loose skin, leaving a trail of blood and grappa. I ran again, past the mirror alcove, curtain still closed, but the velvet was soaked through, dripping dark, and toward the elevator. The call button didn't respond. The red phone was off the hook, cord chewed through like something with too many teeth had worried at it. Behind me, footsteps, wet, slap, drag, slap. I turned, Gallo, no. The thing wearing Gallo was walking the gallery, strips of his skin trailing behind like a bridal train made of meat. He raised one hand. The fingers were lengthening, joints multiplying, nails blackening into talons. You covered the mirror, he called, almost gentle. The bargain was broken. Now the flaying happens now, and it's always the one who loves you most who does the cutting. He smiled with Gallo's mouth. I taught you the rules. Son, you should have listened. The skinless reflection from the mirror stepped out from behind him. Not a reflection anymore. Real, raw muscle glistening under the flickering bulbs. Eyes milk white like Mateo's. It raised a hand made of exposed tendon and bone and waved. I screamed until my throat bled. Then the lights went out, and in the dark, the sound of skin hitting marble, getting closer. Chapter 7, the night every seal broke. The darkness in the elevator shaft wasn't empty. It pressed, thick, wet, alive, like being submerged in ink that had lungs and opinions. I pounded the emergency button until my fist went numb. But the car didn't move. The chanting below me grew louder, reverse Latin, words slithering backward through the cables, twisting into shapes that hurt to hear. Then the lights flickered once, red, like fresh blood, and the elevator lurched upward, not smooth, jerking, grinding, like something with claws was hauling it hand over hand. The doors opened on level 7 with a scream of metal. I stumbled out into hell that had learned manners. The gallery was freezing, not cold, freezing, the kind of cold that happens when God looks away. My breath crystallized midair, fell like glass shards, and shattered on the marble. Every sanctuary lamp had gone out except one, far down the main aisle, burning with a flame the color of bruised plums. The temperature gauge on the wall, analog, installed sometime during the Cold War, read 32 digits and dropping. Frost spiderwebbed across the glass cases so fast I heard it crackle. Then the book started bleeding. Not metaphor, actual blood, dark and thick as sacramental wine, oozing from the spines of the grimoires in section 30. It ran down the shelves in rivulets, pooling on the floor, spelling words I recognized from forbidden rites, names that should never be written, let alone read. The air filled with the smell, copper pennies, wet stone, and the particular sweetness of incense left too long in a confessional where someone died screaming. A laugh echoed from the reliquary wing, low, wet, ancient, Aramaic. The language Christ spoke when he cursed the fig tree. I knew it from exorcisms, the way it rolls like gravel in a dying throat, the crucified skeletons in the glass cases, martyrs who'd refused to recant. Bones wired together for display were moving, heads turning with soft clicks of vertebrae, mouths opening, laughing, one of them. A woman with a crown of thorns still embedded in the skull, lifted a bony hand and pointed straight at me. The crucifixes followed, every single one on the walls, hundreds, some older than the building, rotated slowly upside down, wood creaking like old bones. Then they began to weep, not blood, gold, molten gold dripping from Christ's feet, sizzling where it hit the frost, sending up curls of steam that smelled like melted chalices and burning heresy. I ran toward the guard's lounge because it was the only place with a door that locked. My shoes stuck to the floor, blood freezing into red ice. Behind me, the laughter spread, multiplied, became a chorus of children. I risked a look back. Matteo Rossi stood at the center of the gallery, barefoot in his frozen footprints, black candle raised high. Around him, shadows peeled away from the walls, child-shaped, but wrong. Too many joints, heads tilted at angles that would snap a neck, dozens of them, hundreds, an army of 9-year-olds who'd never grown up because something down here wouldn't let them. They opened their mouths in perfect unison and began to chant the Lord's Prayer backward, every word inverted, every syllable a nail pulling loose from the cross. The frost on the floor cracked. Something massive shifted beneath the marble. I reached the lounge, slammed the door, threw the deadbolt. The red phone was already ringing. I snatched it up. Gallo? My voice came out shredded, static. Then Matteo's voice, soft as a bedtime story. You were never guarding the archives. Father Luca, the archives were guarding you. The line went dead. I backed away from the door. The temperature gauge here read 35 degrees Celsius now. The coffee in Gallo's cup had frozen solid, grappa forming perfect crystals like tiny frozen screams. I grabbed the master keycard from my belt, the one made of bone beads, and stared at it, warm, always warm, like it was alive. That's when I noticed the wall safe behind Gallo's chair, the one he'd never opened in front of me. The dial was spinning by itself. Click, click, click. The door swung open with a sigh. Inside, a single folder, yellowed, marked with the papal seal from before the Reformation. I pulled it out with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. Top page. A charcoal sketch of the gallery as it looked now, books bleeding, crucifixes inverted, child shadows chanting, dated 1878. Beneath it, in Latin, Carcer angeli quidocuit cainum, the cage of the angel who taught Cain. I read fast, heart hammering so hard I felt it in my teeth. Level 7 wasn't built to store forbidden books. It was built to imprison something that walked out of Eden right after the first murder. The angel who took pity on Cain whispered in his ear how to hide the body, how to lie to God, how to mark himself so no one could kill him. The watcher who fell not for lust, but for mercy gone wrong. Bound here by Enochian chains, forged from the nails of the true cross, rusted over centuries by the blood of martyrs who knew the secret. The chains weren't metaphor, they were literal, running beneath the floor, woven into the foundations, kept strong by prayers no one had said aloud since the council. Vatican II hadn't just opened windows to the world, it had cracked the cage. The boy, Matteo, wasn't a ghost. He was the doorkeeper. The first child offered to hold the lock when the old guardians died off. There were others before him. There would be others after, if the chains broke completely. The angel would walk again, teach the world what it taught Cain, how to kill and never be punished. The folder ended with a single line in modern ink, gallows handwriting. I realized with a lurch. The next failed exorcist opens the door, or becomes it. The door to the lounge exploded inward. Frost and blood and shadow poured through. Matteo stood there, candle extinguished now, flame replaced by a hole straight through his hand leaking black light. Behind him, the child army advanced, barefoot steps cracking the ice. The crucified skeletons marched with them, bones clacking like castanets. Books flapped open on the shelves, pages turning themselves to illustrations of murders that hadn't happened yet. I backed into the safe. My hand closed around something cold and heavy, the original Enochian chain fragment, kept as a relic. It burned like dry ice. Matteo smiled. The expression split his face too wide. Time to choose, Father, he whispered. Every child shadow whispered with him. Close the door like you couldn't in Naples, or open it all the way. The temperature hit 40 degrees Celsius. The last sanctuary lamp went out. In the dark, the angel stirred, and for the first time since I arrived, I heard chains rusting through completely. Chapter 8, The Backward Exorcism. The chains didn't break with a dramatic snap. They sighed, a long, exhausted exhalation of iron that had held for 17 centuries, finally giving up. The sound traveled through the marrow of the building, up the elevator shafts, into the basilica above where tourists were already lining up for morning mass, oblivious to the fact that the floor beneath their feet had just become optional. I clutched the Enochian fragment to my chest like a child with a broken toy. It was warm now, pulsing in time with something ancient waking up. The child shadows poured into the lounge, their backward prayer rising to a shriek that cracked the frost on the windows. Matteo? No. The thing steering Matteo walked through them like a general through smoke, his milk-white eyes fixed on me, and for the first time I saw pity in them, real pity, the kind you give a dog that's about to be put down. You were always the door, Luca, he said, voice layered with 1,000 children's throats. Not the guardian, The replacement lock. The deepest chamber was never on any map. You found it by following the smell, old blood baked into stone for so long it had become part of the rock itself. I ran, not away this time, toward past the bleeding books that now opened themselves to blank pages, past the laughing skeletons who'd torn free of their cases and were dancing some obscene jig with inverted crucifixes as partners. The temperature was rising now, frost sublimating into steam that carried the scent of Eden's morning, apples rotting on the branch, smoke from the first murder still curling. The chamber door was open. It had never been a door, just an illusion of one, painted onto solid stone by popes who understood that some things are kept out by pretending they're already in. Beyond it, the scroll waited on a pedestal carved from a single block of black marble veined with gold, real gold, hammered from the 30 pieces paid to Judas, or so the suppressed file claimed. The parchment was older than Christianity, older than Rome, written in a script that hurt to perceive directly, the secret name of the angel who taught Cain the irreversible art. Something was reading it, not Matteo, something wearing the children like a choir robe. It stood in the center of the chamber, a shape made of absence where light should have been. There was less than darkness. The scroll unrolled itself backward, words lifting off the page like smoke in reverse, flowing into the thing's mouth that wasn't a mouth. If I burned it, the binding would fail quietly. The angel would walk unseen, teaching the world one murder at a time until mercy itself was forgotten. A slow death, the kind the church specialized in. If I finished the reading forward, the unbinding would be complete, loud, immediate. Cities would wake to find their children teaching parents new ways to hide bodies, the kind of apocalypse that makes headlines. I chose neither. I stepped into the circle of salt that had once been white and was now black with age. The thing paused its reading. Curious, the children tilted their heads in perfect synchronization. I opened my mouth and spoke the rite from Naples, not forward, not backward, exactly as I'd botched it the first time, the moment when I'd hesitated on the true name of God, when mercy had cracked my certainty and let the demon keep the girl. The words came out wrong again, beautifully wrong. The chamber shook. The angel, that vast, pitying absence, recoiled as if I'd struck it with something worse than fire, because what I offered wasn't destruction or completion. I offered myself, the failed exorcist, the door that wouldn't close, the man who'd let one girl become a vessel because he couldn't bear to lose her soul entirely. I spoke the binding not to the angel, but to my own name, offered the crack in my faith as the new cage. The children screamed, not in backward Latin now, in Italian, Neapolitan dialect, the girl's voice leading them. Luca, no, don't. It's cold in here. The scroll burst into flame without being touched, not the quiet burn of apocalypse denied. A clean, surgical fire that consumed only the name, leaving the parchment blank and smoking. The angel howled, a sound like every mercy killing in history happening at once, and rushed toward me, not in anger, but in desperation. It needed a home, any home. I opened my arms. It poured in, not possession, containment. The difference is academic until you're the jar. I felt Eden's morning rush through my veins, Cain's trembling hands, Abel's confusion, the angel's terrible compassion, whispering that some deaths are kinder than others. The children collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Mateo aged 63 years in a heartbeat, crumbling to dust that spelled sorry in the salt circle before the wind took it. The chamber went quiet. Dawn found me walking out through the basilica's side entrance, the one the cleaners use. My collar was soaked black, blood or ink. I wasn't sure. My eyes, when I caught them in a reflective window, were the same milk white as Mateo's had been. The rosary of finger bones hung from my belt, warm and content. I left the journal on a bench in St. Peter's Square, right where the tourists sit to eat their panini and complain about the pigeons. The note on top was simple, written in my handwriting that no longer shook. If you're reading this, the archives are hiring. Ask for Father Moretti. Tell them you're not afraid of children. A woman picked it up, mid-40s, American accent, wearing a Roma 2025 t-shirt. She frowned, opened to the first page, and I watched understanding dawn slow and terrible across her face. I smiled. The expression felt too large for my skull, because the children were never the scary part. The scary part is what we've been teaching them, and class just started.